The blade gleams in the darkness. The silence of the night is heavy, heavier than the crown that once rested on her head. The crowd is a sea of faces, their eyes fixed on the silver-haired woman kneeling on the oak block. She is Queen Lyra, the traitor, the poisoner. Tomorrow she will be the decapitated queen. But tonight, in the hour before dawn, the executioner and the priests are not the only witnesses. King Theron, her husband, stands on the gallery, his face pale and grim. His eyes are not those of a betrayed husband, but of a man who seeks an answer. The queen watches him, a cold smile on her lips. They expect her repentance, a plea for mercy. Instead, she breaks the silence with a confession. But this is not a confession of guilt. It is an act of pure vengeance. She speaks, and her voice is surprisingly strong, cutting through the icy air like a knife. "They want my confession," she says, her eyes fixed on the king. "They want my repentance. But they will have neither. They don't know what the truth is. They don't know that my greatest betrayal was not against my king, but for my kingdom." She then begins to reveal the secrets she has carried for years. She speaks of a forbidden love, of a stolen heir, of a pact made in blood. The crowd gasps, but the king watches her with a cold fury. He is not watching her as a traitor, but as a woman who has a secret he must know. Her confession is not an act of redemption, but an act of war. And the war is about to begin. The palace of King Theron is a place of secrets, and tonight you will learn them all. But this story is more than just a tale of queens and kings. It's a story about the lies we tell ourselves to survive. Comment below from what city or country you are hearing this forbidden tale, and subscribe, because sometimes the sharpest blade is the truth no one dares to speak. "They believe my crime was born of a lustful heart," Queen Lyra's voice echoed, cold and clear in the pre-dawn air. "But my first betrayal was one of pure, desperate love. It was a love that grew in the dark, a love that was a rebellion against a life I was forced to live." Her eyes, filled with a terrible sorrow, were locked on King Theron. "My marriage to the king was a cold alliance, a political trap built of steel and false smiles. I was brought here as a vessel for an heir, nothing more. I was a queen, but I was also a prisoner in a gilded cage. Every day was a performance, a ritual of duty and obedience. The heart, however, cannot be silenced. It hungers for warmth, for truth, for a connection that is not a negotiation." She paused, a ghost of a bitter smile on her lips. "I found that warmth not in a man of titles, but in a man of dirt and horses. Elias, the stablemaster, was a man with rough, calloused hands and an honest heart. He saw me not as a queen, but as a woman. One afternoon, a horse had thrown me. I was alone, humiliated, with my dress stained with mud. Elias did not rush to my side in a frenzy of deference. He approached with a quiet calm, offering a hand not to a monarch, but to a person in need. He didn't speak of my beauty or my grace. He simply offered to help me up. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of hay and the gentle breathing of horses, I felt a connection deeper than any I had ever known. The crowd stirred, a tide of shock and disbelief rippling through them. A queen and a stable master. It was a scandal more shocking than any political treason. King Theron's hand tightened on the railing of the gallery, his knuckles turning white. Our love was a secret held in the quiet of the night, a silent rebellion against a life of lies. We would meet in the stables after the court had gone to sleep, the only light being the moon and the lanterns swinging gently in the wind. We spoke of dreams, of hopes, of a life free from the lies and daggers of the court. He was my sanctuary. For 2 years, he was my only solace, and in the second year, our secret took the form of a new life, a child, a son, conceived in love, not in duty. This was not the king's heir. This was mine, and he was a threat to everything. Her voice lowered, filled with a sorrow more chilling than the cold air. To keep him safe, I had to make a choice. I could have exposed King Theron's secret infertility, a truth he had hidden from the entire kingdom. But that would have led to a brutal civil war, and my son, a bastard, would have been the first casualty. So I made a different kind of deal. A pact with a man you all trusted, a man who preached honesty and faith, High Priest Valerius. I went to him in the darkest hour of the night, trembling with fear and desperation. I told him everything. He listened, his face a mask of piety and concern. He promised to take my son away, to hide him in a distant monastery where no one would ever find him. He swore to me on his life that my son would live, protected and forgotten. In return, I would ensure his political rival, Lord Corvus, was neutralized. He saw Corvus as a heretic, a threat to the church. He told me that Lord Corvus would expose our secret. I did what he asked. I forged letters in Lord Corvus's hand, detailing a false plot to overthrow the king. I planted them in his private library. Lord Corvus was arrested, tried, and executed within a week. The king mourned his brother, but he never suspected the truth. I had given him a kingdom without a rival. In return, my son lived. The high priest had his enemy removed, and I had my revenge on a system that had trapped me. A tear slipped down Lyra's face, but her eyes remained cold and hard. I had to watch my lover Elias die in an arranged accident in the stables a month later. He was a loose end, a threat to the Queen's reputation. I grieved in silence, my heart a hollow tomb of regret. But my child was safe, and that was all that mattered. That was my first crime. I killed a good man, destroyed the king's own brother, all to protect my son. But I did not confess this out of guilt. I confess it out of rage, because my son, the stolen heir, is not hidden away in some distant monastery. My son is right here, in this very palace. He has been here all along, and he has a more powerful secret than any of you can imagine. The high priest lied to me. He did not send my son away. The high priest promised he would hide my son, that my child would be safe and forgotten. Queen Lyra's voice rose, a sharp, cold accusation cutting through the tense silence. He lied. He never intended to hide him. He intended to claim him and to mold him into the perfect weapon. She paused, letting the full weight of the revelation settle in the air. The crowd was a storm of murmurs, their confusion a tangible force. King Theron's face was a mask of cold fury, but Lyra saw the frantic, unspoken question in his eyes. The high priest, that man of God you all revere, did not act out of piety. He acted out of a heretical ambition. He saw my son, the child of a queen and a stable master, as the perfect tool. He saw a child with royal blood, a child born without the king's knowledge, a child whose very existence was a secret weapon. He saw a means to control the throne, to install a puppet who owed him everything. He saw a key, not to the kingdom, but to an ancient power he worshipped in secret, a power he calls the Unseen Lord. Lyra's confession was no longer just a tale of political betrayal. It was a story of occult terror. He did not just steal my child. He took him and raised him, not in a distant monastery, but right here, under our noses, in the very heart of this court. He gave him a new name, a new history, a new life built on a foundation of lies. He presented him to the kingdom as the orphaned ward of the crown, the child of a distant, deceased cousin. A boy he, the high priest, had rescued and taken under his wing. He saw him not as a child, but as an investment. Her gaze swept over the horrified faces of the nobles. Her voice, filled with a bitter, triumphant rage, carried a chilling finality. You all embraced him. You watched him grow. You prepared him to take his rightful place at the king's side. You taught him to be a knight, a nobleman, a man of God. You prepared him to stand as the pillar of the court's righteousness. But you were all fooled, because the child you believed to be the king's closest confidant, the boy you call Ser Jorah, is my son. He is the stolen heir. He is the child of a queen and a stable master. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd, a tidal wave of shock and disbelief. Sir Jorah, the king's most loyal knight, the man who stood as the king's pillar of strength and righteousness, was the illegitimate son of the queen and her murdered lover. The king's face, once a mask of fury, was now a portrait of utter, heartbreaking betrayal. He had taken the son of his own enemy under his wing, grooming him to be his most trusted knight. And now, you see the true face of the high priest, Lyra continued, her voice gaining a chilling momentum. He did not just orchestrate the death of Lord Corvus. He manipulated me, a grieving woman, into doing his bidding. He knew I loved Elias, and he knew I would do anything to protect our child. He told me that Lord Corvus was a threat to my son, a man who would expose our secret. He knew that my love was so powerful it would blind me to the truth. And so I framed the king's own brother. I destroyed a good man, not for my own gain, but for the life of my son. The blood pact was not just between me and a priest. It was a pact with a demon who was wearing a holy man's mask. Lyra's confession was no longer just a list of betrayals. It was an intricate web of manipulation, a masterpiece of deceit that had spanned years. She had been a pawn, but she was a pawn who had just toppled the entire chessboard. She had not only revealed a secret, she had exposed a lie that had been at the heart of the kingdom for a decade. The king's supposed heir was a fraud. The high priest was a conspirator. They thought that by stealing my child, they could control the throne. They thought they could silence me. They thought that I would die with their secrets in my heart. But the greatest secret, the one that can never be hidden, is that the king, my husband, is not an innocent victim in this game. He is far from a fool. He is a man with his own dark secrets. Secrets so powerful they made me do what I had to do to survive. She looked at the king, her eyes filled with a cold, unforgiving fire. My greatest betrayal was for my kingdom. His greatest betrayal was against it. And now I will tell you how he became a king by sacrificing his own family. The crowd sees a king who mourned his brother. Queen Lyra's voice cut through the stillness, cold and sharp. They see a man who suffered. But I saw the truth. I saw the fear in his eyes, a fear born of a lie. The king you so admire, King Theron, is not the rightful heir to this throne. He murdered his way onto it. A horrified silence fell over the crowd. The accusations had escalated from treason and adultery to regicide. King Theron's face, once a mask of fury, was now pale with shock. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. His older brother, Prince Daemon, was the true heir. Lyra continued, her voice gaining a chilling momentum. Daemon was a good man, a just man, a man of the people. He was the crown prince beloved by all. He was a man who saw the rot in this court and sought to cleanse it. He wanted to reform the High Council, to cut the power of the wealthiest noble houses, and to bring justice to the common folk. King Theron, my husband, saw his brother's popularity not as a strength, but as a threat. He knew he could never rule in Daemon's shadow, and so, on a cold winter hunt years ago, King Theron arranged for his brother's accident. Lyra's confession was a precise, meticulous account of a murder. She described the hunt, the day cold and grey, the air thick with the scent of pine and death. She painted a picture of King Theron, then a prince, watching his brother with a cold, hungry look in his eyes. The royal stag was a magnificent beast, she recounted. It was a beast that was meant to be the king's. Daemon, however, was a better hunter. He was about to take the shot, a shot that would have won him the royal favour. But Theron, with the help of a rogue sorcerer, arranged for a flash of light to startle the stag. Daemon, a seasoned hunter, was knocked from his horse and fell to his death on the rocks below. It was called a tragedy. I watched the king mourn, and I saw his face. I did not see grief. I saw a man who had won. He needed to cover his tracks. He needed a legitimate heir, a pure line of succession to secure his stolen throne. This is why he married me, not for love, but for a son. This is why my forbidden love for Elias and my pregnancy were not just a betrayal of a man, but a threat to his entire reign. My son, a bastard, was a living testament to his own illegitimate claim. He couldn't kill my son without a scandal. He couldn't kill me without a war. And so he lived in a prison of his own making, a prison of secrets and lies, terrified that one day I would expose his truth. Lyra's voice was filled with a cold, triumphant finality. He accuses me of treason, of betrayal, but he is a man who betrayed his own blood. He is a man who killed his brother for a crown that was not his. He is a man who accused me of a crime that he himself committed. I am not confessing to my sins. I am exposing his. My first betrayal was to protect my son. His first betrayal was to secure his throne. Our crimes were a mirror of each other, a reflection of the rotten heart of this kingdom. He thought I was a pawn in a game of power. He thought I was a fool. He thought he had me trapped. But I had a secret that could destroy him. A secret so powerful that it could bring down not just the king, but the entire religious order of this kingdom. The high priest, the man who stole my son, was not just a co-conspirator. He was a man with his own dark agenda, a man who was a heretic, a man who worshipped not God, but a demon. You believe the high priest to be a man of God? Queen Lyra's voice was a chilling whisper that echoed through the stunned silence. You believe he has faith in the light, but I know his true faith, a faith not in God, but in a demon he calls the unseen Lord. The crowd stirred uneasily. This was no longer a tale of political treachery. This was heresy. This was something far darker. The king's face was a mask of cold fury, but Lyra saw the fear in his eyes. He knew. He did not just steal my son for a political coup, she confessed, her voice filled with a terrible sorrow. He stole him for a ritual. The high priest is a necromancer, a man who believes that royal blood is the key to opening a door between worlds. He wanted a child born of royal blood, a child born in love, to be the vessel for his unseen lord. He used me, my love, my desperation, to give him a key to the throne and a key to hell itself. Lyra's confession was a precise, meticulous account of a demonic plot. She detailed how the pact in blood she had made with him was not just a symbol, but an actual ritual. She had, in her grief, given him a drop of her blood to seal their promise. But in reality, it was a part of a dark summoning ritual. The high priest was using her as a tool to open a door to a darker world. She revealed that the strange sickness that had been plaguing the kingdom, the sickness that had made the land infertile and the crops wilt, was not a natural occurrence. It was the result of a dark ritual, a slow, methodical poisoning of the kingdom to weaken its defenses against a demonic invasion. He needed a king who would look the other way, a king who would allow him to conduct his dark rituals. He needed a king who was so desperate for power that he would sell his kingdom to a demon for a throne he had stolen. And he found that man in my husband, King Theron. The final, most devastating secret was revealed. The king himself was a part of the plot. He was not just a man who had murdered his brother for a throne. He was a man who had made a pact with a demon to keep it. He had known about the high priest's true nature. He had known about the dark rituals. He had allowed the kingdom to be poisoned, to be corrupted, all for the sake of his stolen throne. Lyra's eyes, filled with tears of sorrow and rage, were now fixed on the king. He is not a victim, she said, her voice a chilling whisper. He is a monster. He is a man who would sell his kingdom to a demon for a crown. He is a man who would sacrifice his people, his family, his soul, for power. He is the true traitor, and I am the only one who can expose him. Lyra's confession had brought the kingdom to its knees. She had exposed the king, the high priest, and the entire royal line. She had revealed a conspiracy so vast and so dark that it threatened to tear the kingdom apart. But she was not finished. She had one final and most devastating secret to reveal, a secret that would not just expose them, but destroy them. "My final act of vengeance is not against you, my king," she said, her voice filled with a cold, triumphant finality. "It is against a lie that has held this kingdom together for centuries, and it is a truth that will bring this entire kingdom to its knees." They thought my final secret would be a whisper. Queen Lyra's voice, now a chilling echo, resonated through the square. But a whisper is for a small sin. My final truth is a scream that will shatter the very foundation of this kingdom. She looked at the king and then at the high priest, a slow, venomous smile spreading across her face. "You believe the royal line is ancient, a bloodline that stretches back 1,000 years. You believe that your king, your high priest, your entire court is chosen by God. You believe that you rule because of divine right. You are wrong. Every last one of you is a fool." The crowd stirred, their murmurs growing louder, a tide of fear and confusion. Lyra waited for a moment, letting the tension build, letting her words sink in. "The great lie that has held this kingdom together for 1,000 years is that the royal line is not divine. It is not pure. It is a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. The true bloodline, the true heirs to this throne, were exterminated by a dark, heretical cult 1,000 years ago. The current royal line, the line you serve, is nothing more than a carefully chosen puppet family, installed by that same cult to rule in its name." Lyra's confession was no longer just about treason. It was about heresy. It was about the very foundation of the kingdom. She revealed that the so-called divine right of the kings of Viridian was nothing more than a myth. The royal family, the high priest, and the entire court were puppets, their strings pulled by a secret society of heretics who worshipped not God, but a demon they called the Unseen Lord. The same demon the high priest Valerius was trying to bring to the world. She then pointed at the high priest, her finger trembling. "He is not just a traitor, he is a cultist, he is a heretic, and the king is not his victim. The king is his accomplice. The king knew about the true nature of the royal line. He knew he was a puppet. He knew his throne was built on a lie. He knew the high priest was using him to bring a demon to this world, and he allowed it, all for the sake of his crown." The king's face was a mask of utter, heartbreaking betrayal. He had been so desperate to secure his stolen throne that he had made a pact with a demon, a pact that was now revealed in front of the entire kingdom. He was not a king. He was a traitor, a heretic, a monster. The king and the high priest had not just betrayed Lyra, they had betrayed the entire kingdom, the entire world. They had sold their souls for power, and now they would pay the price. Lyra's confession was a final and most devastating act of vengeance. She had exposed the king, the high priest, and the entire royal line. She had revealed a conspiracy so vast and so dark that it threatened to tear the kingdom apart. But she was not finished. She had one final and most devastating secret to reveal. A secret that would not just expose them, but destroy them. "My final act of vengeance is not against you, my king," she said, her voice filled with a cold, triumphant finality. "It is against a lie that has held this kingdom together for centuries, and it is a truth that will bring this entire kingdom to its knees." The crowd was a storm of noise, a tide of fear and confusion. The king and the high priest stood on the gallery, their faces stripped of all power and arrogance. They had been exposed, their secrets laid bare for the entire kingdom to see. The king, once a man who had murdered his way to the throne, was now a man who had sold his soul for it. The high priest, once a man of God, was now a man who had made a pact with a demon. The two men who had held the kingdom together with their lies were now at the mercy of a crowd that had just been told that their entire world was a lie. The executioner stood over the queen, his hand on the hilt of his sword. He looked at the king, waiting for the final order. The king, however, was in a state of shock, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. He was no longer a king. He was a man who had just lost everything. The high priest was no better, his face a grim mask of defeat. They had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered by a woman they had dismissed as a pawn, a woman who had just brought their entire kingdom to its knees. Lyra looked at the king, her eyes filled with a cold, unforgiving fire. "You are not a victim," she said. "You are a monster. You are a man who would sell his kingdom to a demon for a crown. You are a man who would sacrifice his people, his family, his soul for power. You are the true traitor, and I am the only one who can expose you." She then looked at the high priest. "You are not a man of God. You are a man who has made a pact with a demon. You are a man who would sacrifice an entire kingdom for power. You are the true heretic, and I am the only one who can expose you." The queen then turned to the crowd, her eyes filled with a new kind of power, a power that she had never had in life, a power that came from the truth. "The king is a liar," she said, her voice a chilling whisper that echoed through the entire city. "The high priest is a heretic. The royal line is a lie. This kingdom is built on a foundation of betrayal and blood. I am a traitor, but I am not a liar. I have confessed to my sins, but I have exposed theirs. I'm a queen who has lost everything, but I have given you the one thing they could not give you, the truth." The executioner, no longer waiting for the king's order, raised his sword. The king looked at him, his face a mask of terror. He opened his mouth to speak, but it was too late. The queen, a woman who had spent her life as a pawn, had just become a queen in death. Her final words, a confession of betrayal and a testament to the truth, would now live forever. She had done it. She had exposed the lies. She had avenged her love, her son, and her kingdom. She had won. The sharpest blade is not made of steel, it's made of truth. The final confession of a woman with nothing left to lose is not an act of surrender, but a declaration of war. Her final words, a warning to her people, would echo through the history of the kingdom forever. What is the one truth you believe is worth fighting for? Let me know in the comments below, and if you believe that the most powerful stories belong to those who refuse to be silenced, be sure to subscribe to the channel.